What's happening, guys? This is Logan Robinson from Here the Spear, presented to you by NoleGameday.com. We're here live on a wonderful, fantastic Monday afternoon, and we've got QB1 calling out the Alabama Crimson Tide. We're going to talk heavily into that interview that Thomas Castellanos had with On 3. We also got Florida State landing a big armed quarterback for its 2026 class with Jaden O'Neal. We'll pop up some film there and discuss that one there for Gus Malzahn and the offense moving forward in Tallahassee. And then Florida State, Herb Hand, Florida State's new offensive line coach, lands a commitment from an international guy from London, a 2026 offensive lineman, Luke Francis. We'll give our thoughts on that one. And then we're going to talk about Florida State losing out on a commitment to finish off the show. But with me this afternoon is Dustin Lewis, our editor-in-chief at NoleGameday.com. And over to the other side is Austin Veazey. Gentlemen, who knew this Monday would bring QB1 going after Alabama, talking about Bill O'Brien, Boston College, calling out the ACC. It's a little bit different than DJ Uyangale this point last year.
Yeah, it's been an interesting start to the week already. And, I'm still catching back up. I was in South Florida over the weekend. And, of course, yesterday on that drive back home to Tallahassee from Fort Lauderdale, about 7 to 8 hours, that's when everything starts popping off with Luke Francis go ahead and commit to Florida State, Jaden O'Neal obviously joining Tribe 26 after backing off that commitment from Oklahoma a couple of days ago, and Xavier Payne, a guy who committed to Florida State back in December of 2024, going ahead and reopening his respective recruitment. So I swear, every time that I've got something on the docket, that's when all the busy stuff happens in the Florida State world. Like Saturday, I was free until 6 o'clock. Friday, I was pretty free. Let's wait till Sunday when he's in the car.
I was the same thing for me yesterday with the Mavs. You'd expect the NBA offseason to be slow, and I'm actually busy for once for about 3 hours, and 3 things break. It's just how the world works when we're busy. It makes no sense.
Nope, it does not, and had a feeling that would be the way. And if you ever need anything to happen, just be away from your laptop or iPad in this business. But we have a lot to discuss this afternoon. Before we get started, if you're on YouTube right now with us, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Also, too, give us your thoughts on how you feel about Thomas Castellanos calling out Alabama. We're going to get to that in just a minute. But first, let's start off with Florida State landing Jaden O'Neal, former Oklahoma quarterback commit. We had discussed this last week on the show, Dustin, that this was something that was projected for Florida State to land him. And sure enough, the Seminoles get the grab, and Gus Malzahn gets his guy. Really strong arm, a guy that can get the ball downfield. And that's something I think that this offense is wanting to do moving forward under Gus. Your thoughts on the pickup, Dustin, and I'll put up some film for everybody to watch.
Yeah, first off, bringing an elite arm to Tallahassee and Jaden O'Neal, probably one of the best passers in this 2026 class, someone who's really able to stretch that field and give you the opportunity to create big plays, which is obviously something that Gus Malzahn, taking over at offensive coordinator, is trying to bring back to Florida State. And I think his arm is the main attraction, but this is a guy who can still do it with his legs. I wouldn't necessarily call him a dual threat quarterback, but he's not like Tom Brady in the pocket either. He gets into dicey situations. He'll be able to give himself a chance to get out of it. Now, he's not what Gus Malzahn had at Auburn and a Cam Newton or a Nick Marshall as far as, running the ball. But like I said, with his ability to create things through the air, it's going to be really exciting to see what he can do once he gets to Florida State. And, FSU, they pretty much put all their chips in this basket to land Jaden O'Neal. Obviously, expanded that board after Brady Smigel reopened his recruitment in January. Tried to get Keyshawn Henderson on campus. He canceled that trip, locked things down with Houston. Tried to get Landon Duckworth in for that official visit, and he ended up cutting Florida State out in favor of Auburn and South Carolina. And remember, Bowie Bentley, he was only one of those 3 that actually made it to campus for an unofficial visit back in the spring. He moved on in favor of LSU and Oklahoma, recently made that commitment to the Sooners. And that was a big reason why, Jaden O'Neal was reevaluating things with his commitment to Oklahoma, ultimately decided to back off of that. And then now, a couple days later, about a week after he wrapped up that official visit to Florida State, he goes ahead and joins Tribe 26. And it's big to go ahead and get him on the boat now. I think, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, Florida State needed a quarterback. They needed a voice. They needed that guy who can be the face of Tribe 26. And you get a guy in Jaden O'Neal, who, I mean, not only is a good football player, on the field, but also a very charismatic individual, someone that I think other players in this 2026 class will be interested in playing alongside him in Tallahassee and, possibly joining this 2026 class. So we'll see with him jumping into the boat. And Florida State, they've got multiple targets committing here, in late June and into July. We'll see if this spurt of FSU adding Jaden O'Neal will help them land some of these guys over the next couple of weeks, continue filling out this 2026 class, which is obviously moving in the right direction.
When you're first looking at the film, you can see, like you were mentioning, the mobility is something that doesn't stand out to you. It's his arm, the way that he can get the ball down the field, and also too in some tight spaces, as we're seeing and here with some of these intermediate routes. Still, I mean, look at the arm. I mean, he's got some darts. It comes out easy from him. Big size quarterback. What is he? 6'3", 6'3", and 215 pounds already. Still got a senior season ahead for him. But you could tell the size difference too against some of these other high school competition as well. But that's a really good throw there from Jaden. But I think it's a solid pickup there. And like you were mentioning, it's not something of the prototype that usually Gus Malzahn likes to run his offenses with primarily. But a good arm always helps a ton at the quarterback position. And I feel like to me, I'm interested to see how it does on the recruiting trail going forward. Like you were just mentioning there, D-Lo, maybe some names to watch or some that Florida State probably can now put themselves in a good position. Once you have that quarterback solidified in your class, now you can try to build around that. And sure enough, we've seen this. We're going to talk about a commitment here in just a minute, but it seems to be building now and some recruiting momentum for the offense moving forward.
And Jaden O'Neal, I mean, this is a guy who has proven himself as a winner at the high school level. During his junior season at Narbonne High School, led the team to a state championship, and he was named the MVP of that victory. A 75-31 win where he completed 14 to 21 passes for 396 yards and 6 touchdowns, and also added a 35-yard rushing score. So, that goes to speak about the athletic ability of Jaden O'Neal.
Mm-hmm. How do y'all feel about this shot here with Thomas Castellanos, who we're about to speak on, handing over the keys to Jaden O'Neal? I wasn't so sure. Hey, it's so did social media at the end of the day. You got to get it's all about, it's just a post. It's just a post. But I got to see Castellanos take a snap first before he can hand over the keys, right?
Yeah, that's where I'm leaning. I mean, the graphic's cool. I love the mural in the background and the spear laying against the wall. But yeah, like, let's not go 2-10 before we're handing over keys. Let's start there.
Do it for the gram.
It's definitely for the gram there, absolutely. But it seems like you were mentioning, Dustin, charismatic individual, and Florida State tries to pride themselves in the locker room first before anything else, and having that be at the quarterback position is great, and seems like he's got a lot of confidence as well, and is very active in the offseason too, and a lot of these tournaments and 7-on-7s and all these other kind of things. So it's gonna be very interesting how the ripple effects happened over here. But originally committed over there to Oklahoma, now over to Florida State, and they get a strong arm at the quarterback position. And in the state championship game, he went 14 of 21, 396 yards, 6 touchdowns, ladies and gentlemen, plus a 35-yard rushing TD. So when it comes down to the big games, he is going to show up and perform, but he's still got one more season at the high school level, and interested to see how well he progresses and improves too.
Thanks for reiterating that.
What? I ain't listening to you.
I know, you never do.
I can't say what I want to say.
I say this something, and then you say the same thing every show.
Yeah, okay.
But just to end this one off, it took Florida State a long time, obviously, to get Jaden O'Neal in the boat. And, I mean, just the way this kind of transpired, it just goes to show, recruiting can change at the drop of a hat. Jaden O'Neal was on campus last summer at Florida State, threw in front of the coaching staff. At the same time as, Brady Smigel, before he was committed to FSU, you had Dia Bell out there as well, who is now committed to Texas. And at the time, Florida State, was focused on that trio to build out the 2026 class. They had all those guys on campus competing, throwing in front of the coaching staff. And then obviously Smigel was the one that committed to Florida State. And then that led to Jaden O'Neal committing to Oklahoma. And then Florida State able to revisit that, rebuild that relationship this offseason, reestablish that, get him on campus, and, set up the opportunity for a flip from Oklahoma with how everything worked out with Bowie Bentley. And, I know Florida State, they, quote unquote, miss out on Keyshawn Henderson. You miss out on Landon Duckworth. But to get a 4-star quarterback in the boat and someone with this amount of arm talent, with the way that FSU is coming off a 2-10 season and made all these changes to the coaching staff. And like we said, I mean, Florida State obviously has something to prove going into 2025. I think this is definitely a big get for them.
Let's move on over here to Thomas Castellanos, who just decided to kind of break it all open for not only just FSU Twitter, but the entire college football landscape. Because after when you go 2-10, all of college football is making fun of you, and it's it's deserved when a season is like that. But now you've got an opposite type of personality quarterback from DJU last year to now one that's very open, maybe too open. I'm interested to see what y'all's takes are, and also too in the comments. But in a recent interview with On3's Pete Nakos, Thomas Castellanos practically calling out the Crimson Tide. What was y'all's thoughts on this over here, saying they don't have Nick Saban to save them? I just don't see them stopping me. I wasn't at first, I'll be honest with you, there's an account that's like not on 3 or no on 3 or something like that. That's practically just a troll account that is putting the stuff out there to get engagement. But I thought at first that's exactly what that was, because I feel like there has been posts about that earlier in the season, but it ended up just being troll accounts, obviously. But this was a real source. This is a true, real interview that Thomas Castellanos had with On3 earlier this morning. That was released. Feels very confident. He said, "I'm excited, man. People, I don't know if they know, but you go back and watch every first game that I played in. We always start fast. I dreamed of moments like this. I dreamed of playing against Alabama. They don't have Nick Saban to save them. I just don't see them stopping me." Some confidence there from QB1, and it's out in the public.
I also thought it was fake whenever it first popped up this morning. I'm like, what are we doing now with this other fake On3 account, or however you say it, however it's spelled out? It's like On3 backwards or whatever. But I mean, certainly, it's a bold proclamation from Tommy Castellanos, and obviously we'll get into some of those other quotes as well. I mean, he had a lot to say, about his departure from Boston College. He had some stuff to say about Florida State, his arrival here, playing under Gus Malzahn, the players around him at FSU. And, I kind of like it, let me be honest, because we've gotten to the point in college football where it's so bland. There's so much fodder, so much coach speak. Guys are afraid to put stuff out there because of social media, how fast it's going to get put around. And you say something about somebody, they're going to know in the next 3 minutes if it's out there on Twitter or Instagram, Facebook, or whatever. So I think, some guys are obviously afraid to light that fire a little bit. And then you've got others like Thomas Castellanos who are so confident in themselves that, sometimes the words just come out. So, I'm personally a fan of it now. And, could it bring some more intrigue to this Alabama game? And maybe we get around there. The Crimson Tide players mentioned that they've seen the quote and everything, adds a little bit more fuel to the fire. I'm all about it.
Yeah, I'm sure there's still someone freaking out in Florida State's football office somewhere about these quotes. It could definitely be taken two ways. Obviously, we've mentioned it too much since the season ended. The team went 2-10, and it's hard to have confidence, especially this kind of confidence that's not just in this quote, but really throughout the entire article that Tommy has. But on the other hand, I kind of like the confidence of saying, hey, I know Florida State wasn't great last year, and maybe I didn't have the greatest year at Boston College because of some coaching drama, but I think we can do something special here. As Luka Doncic once said, everyone likes to talk once they're up. I kind of like someone talking once they're down and seeing if they can play up to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've known about Thomas Castellanos and his confidence, and that's the way that he plays. And I think too, yes, the team went 2-10 last year, but this is a whole new revamped team overall. It's not just with the roster, but also too with the coaching staff as well. And I think it's, for us on the outside and fans too, we're stuck with that 2-10 in our heads, and it will be that way until Florida State kicks off against Alabama. But for a lot of these transfers coming in, and definitely your QB1, there has to be kind of, that's blocked out. You weren't a part of that. You weren't a part of that team. And it's not fair to a lot of those newcomers to be labeled as that. Definitely when you just arrived in Tallahassee, it's a clean slate, and it is a season ahead to prove yourself. And he has a big chip on his shoulder as well, because you had the whole drama, which we'll talk about here, because he did talk about Boston College's time there, but has always had that chip on his shoulder, and he has that fiery attitude, and we've heard a lot of things about that during practices, during scrimmages. He is going to even get chippy a little bit and talk a little bit with the coaches too. Like, he's got that confidence, and I think that's something that you like to see, as long as it can obviously translate onto the field and perform well. But having your QB1 have confidence is something that I felt like lacked immensely. And we knew this going into the season last year immensely with the guy that you had with DJU, where it just didn't feel like you even had a quarterback there. I felt like I had a tight end, not just saying because that was the exact build of a tight end, but he just did not give me any kind of, if I was on the team, I wouldn't get any kind of like fire. I wouldn't get any kind of emotion. I wouldn't get any kind of drive of just anything with DJU there. Now, a guy like Thomas Castellanos, I see him fired up. He's making plays for me out there as well, and he's showing his confidence. That's something that I can ride with, at least starting off to kick off this season, because I know that guy is going to go 110%. So that's my take on it there, on him calling out, Bama. That's a strong thing, though. I mean, maybe they're trying to get. I doubt it's going to be hard to sell tickets. Those tickets are very pricey, but maybe that's what Castellanos is helping out a little bit on. But sign me up. I know the Alabama fan base, along with the rest of the country, has already been given their take on what Castellanos had to say. He also talked about anything else on the Bama call out there, gentlemen?
No, I'd say keep moving.
Well, he also talked about his time at Boston College. He said, I really wish I would have left when Hafley left, but I tried to give it another take. BC wasn't the school for me. I wasn't able to be myself, and I had to try to make myself be something I wasn't. I just didn't like it. Bill O'Brien and I butted heads early in the season. I got banged up a few games. We had a meeting, and it kind of blew up in my face. I did so much for that program, and I did everything that I could, and I just wasn't repaid the right way. You don't usually get that from a college athlete much, else definitely a quarterback as much in this day and age. Like you were saying, Dustin, a lot of these kids now know that anything they say goes out everywhere, including the PR team program tells you just to keep it hush hush. But he was very open on that, and it kind of made a little bit of sense of some things that we were wondering and pondering on, of why did Thomas Castellanos move on from Boston College? What kind of situation happened there? But a little bit of some transparency there from Florida State's QB1.
Yeah, it's very genuine. It's very honest. It's very wrong. And like you said, Logan, I think it's unique with where we're at in the current age of college football. You don't normally get a guy to be this honest about, some of the adversity that they've dealt with at other places, some of the difficult situations that they've went through when it comes to maybe regards of coaches, like he said, button heads with Bill O'Brien there at BC, which, is something that we had noted since his transfer from Boston College. And since Florida State had gotten involved and begun to target him as their quarterback for the 2025 season, things obviously didn't end on a great note for Tommy Castellanos at Boston College, and coming off a 2023 season where, he absolutely dominated, with his legs, showed some talent with the arm, became the first quarterback in Boston College history to pass for 2,000 plus yards and rush for 1,000 plus yards in a single season. It makes sense, even with the coaching change, that he wanted to go back to Boston College and continue to be the guy. And, he was developing into one of the best quarterbacks in that program's respective history, and things went on a sour note in 2024. Now he's in Tallahassee, and as you can see, this guy is not afraid to be himself, and we see it out there on the field. I mean, he plays with a lot of emotion, a lot of energy, a lot of passion. He's out there, getting himself hyped up after big plays. If one of his receivers or running backs make a big play, he's over there hyping those guys up. I think this just shows that Tommy Castellanos, he's trying to get back to being himself after an off year in 2024. And, he's not looking for any apologies. He's trying to go out there on the field and prove it.
It's, as we talked about a few times after he announced his commitment to Florida State, that you can't really look at the stats from last year and get the whole story because it just wasn't the right system for him at Boston College. We know Bill O'Brien doesn't really like running quarterbacks. We saw that at Alabama with Jalen Milroe when he was the play caller there. I am curious to know more details about that meeting that quote unquote blew up in his face. I'm curious to see how and what happened there. But yeah, hopefully he just gets back to the form that we saw in 2023, where he really was a dynamic quarterback and gave a lot of teams issues. If that version shows up, I think a lot of things will be solved out for Florida State.
It'll be a lot more entertaining and fun, and actual, hopefully a 180 from what we saw last year of a lot of 3 and outs and a lot of Alex Mastromano. Love you, Alex Mastromano, but did not want to see you that much at all, to be honest with you, and the rest of the FSU fan base did not. He also talked about FSU and desperate they were on both sides to try to land him and get a quarterback and something to fit also to Gus Malzahn's system. But here's him talking about Florida State. He said, first off, Florida State's been the school I've always wanted to go to. It's my dream school. I just feel like it's right. I remember the last time I went to a 2-10 team and had a successful season. I wanted that challenge to come over here and turn this thing around and get it back to where it needed to be. And plus, I feel like I had a pretty good season or 2 seasons there at BC. I feel like if I did what I did over here, then I'll be way bigger. It will mean a lot more at Florida State. He also talked about, too, Gus Malzahn and Mike Norvell, and giving him the keys and allowing himself to be himself at FSU. He said, just to go out there and play football within the offense. That's what I need. I don't need a dog collar or a leash on me. I just need a coach to say, just be you, go play. That's what I was missing. And also talked to about, both sides wanting each other. He said just how desperate they were, and the same way for me. If this doesn't go right, then who knows? But I just liked how desperate they were. They could have gone out and gotten any quarterback in the country with NIL, and they chose me. Just excited to be where I wanted to be from the get-go. He, talking about Mike Norvell, believed in me to be his quarterback and to be back with Gus Malzahn. VZ, you were nodding your head there.
Are we sure they could have gotten any quarterback they wanted? Are we 100% positive on that?
Maybe not any quarterback. They could have got some other guys.
They could have,
but not all of them. Not like
yeah.
They could have just gone, "Hey, I want this one. You're coming here."
Yeah, I don't know about that quote, and I don't like him saying the word desperate. What was it, 3 times?
Yeah.
I mean, they were. They absolutely were. But I don't like that. I don't like the quarterback they chose saying that.
Yeah, I mean, hey, like we were saying, he's very transparent. He says it straightforward with you, which is different. We're not used to that. Our brains, as people that cover the team and cover all across different leagues, not used to really that kind of transparency until you get in the pros, and guys are pretty straightforward once they have their contract signed. They got their money, so they're a little bit more vocal. But at the collegiate level, you don't get this as much, which I think is pretty unique. But yeah, the desperate part is pretty funny. Kind of roasting Florida State a little bit, but then also saying, "Hey, it's also my situation too."
Is he wrong? I mean, Florida State
I didn't say he was wrong. I never said he was wrong about anything. I like I said, this is something we don't usually get anymore.
Yeah, I did not say he was wrong about that. I'm just saying I don't like him using desperate. That's it.
The Seminoles, they were desperate at the end of that 2024 season. And I think they are desperate, going into this 2025 season to obviously get back on the right page and show that 2024 was just a one-off. And Thomas Castellanos, desperate himself, looking for a place to spend his final season of eligibility and have success in the right system. And, it's possible that he found it with this reunion with Gus Malzahn, dating back to their time together at UCF. And we'll see if that connection is able to rekindle the type of Tommy Castellanos that we saw in 2023 and, combine the good that happened in 2024 where he made some steps forward with that arm as well.
Mm-mm. He also went into talking about the difference in talent between Boston College and now his new team, Florida State. He said, this could be it right here. All they need is one season and 1 year. I feel like I have the skill set to be one of the best. Now I just have to turn this thing around for these guys, for the community, this fan base, and the staff. I'm not playing just for Florida State. I'm playing for coaches who are fathers and who have homes and families here. I'm trying to save jobs and win. That's just a powerful quote right there.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I mean, come on. I mean, goodness gracious, we don't get that much. Anyways, he said, I don't have nearly as much talent as he says, I didn't have as much talent as I do here. Castellanos talking about the talent gap between Boston College and Florida State. He says, I didn't have the guys, but over here, I have some of the best athletic guys. I'm not the fastest one on the team over here. I'm not the most athletic guy on the team. So just being around these guys and just instilling in their heads the winning mentality and what we can do. They got the team. They got the guys. All they needed was a leader in place to lead them. I'm interested. I think about, too, whenever Florida State was in the market looking for a quarterback, which they needed. They needed a big bridge year once again. But looking at Castellanos, they probably did see if they did and they, of course, did their homework on it, but they probably could tell the difference in what the locker room felt like with DJU and what they needed to change moving forward, having a vocal leader, someone with confidence as well. Because, yes, Jordan Travis didn't start off that way. A lot of that was shown on the field with the playmaking that he gave and earned a lot of respect in the locker room. But then we did see him, and we saw him at practices, Dustin, a lot more vocal, a guy that you would see out there on the field. He would make sure he's over there talking with the defense as well, too, getting a little chatty also, too, with Jared Verse, a lot of those guys. But, I mean, Dustin, you're at a lot of those practices with DJU. I went to one. I mean, I like I said, it's kind of like a ghost. Done, I nothing there. There's nothing there for me. But thoughts on this right here? I mean, that's a powerful quote. This man, he's putting the city, he's putting Tallahassee on his shoulders going into this next season.
Yeah, the leadership obviously was missing, not only at the quarterback position, but I mean across the majority of that roster in 2024. And I mean, as the season went on and things continued to degrade, it was just hard for anyone to be a leader with the path that the Seminoles were going down. And, they needed to change that this offseason. They needed those voices in the locker room because, the coaches, they can push the guys so much, but they need guys on the roster to step into that role and hold players accountable as well. And Tommy Castellanos is one of those guys. And I also think it was big, Florida State bringing in Gus Malzahn. He already has that experience with Tommy Castellanos. You're not going out there and getting an unknown. Florida State watched from afar at what DJ did during his college career at Clemson and at Oregon State. But until you get him in the locker room and you're having that firsthand experience, I mean, you can't truly know how a guy operates. Now, Gus Malzahn, he already has that 1 year with Tommy Castellanos. He knows what he's bringing into Florida State. And the job now is to get him back in the right offense, back on the right page, develop chemistry with these new playmakers on Florida State's offense, and go out there and have a heck of a year in 2025.
Mm-hmm. VZ doesn't care about that at all.
He's hungry.
He's a hungry man. Then he also talked about, too, I mean, the confidence just stays going with this young man. But he said, we need to get back to the mentality of the ACC championship, to a good playoff run, to a national championship. But for me, I know I have the skill set to be a Heisman contender, to be up in New York. Interesting. Then he also said, and then at the ACC, I feel like I tore the ACC up by my damn self for the last 2 years, and now I'm good. Now I'm with a squad. I hope people don't think that Florida State is going to be the same team it was last year, because we have weapons. people can't just sit back in zone coverage and watch me.
Yeah, as long as he's not playing like that college football 26 trailer, I've got some confidence.
Yeah, that was messed up. That was messed up by the college football. And then, of course, Kirk Herbstreit's the one narrating it as well.
Of course.
For some context there, everybody, they put out a teaser to the new college football 26 game on EA Sports, and it showed Thomas Castellanos. What was it, one interception or more?
It was an interception downfield, but he had like a wide open pocket, and he's standing there and decides to throw a 40-yard deep bomb instead of just running up the middle like he would probably do in an actual game.
Messed up. Well, Tommy, talking about himself going to the Heisman ceremony. Okay,
let's win a few football games first. I like the confidence, but let's win some games.
We can reevaluate at the end of September.
Yeah, let's do that.
Evaluate that. Well, it's clear that this quarterback that Florida State has is going to be vocal, which is I'm all about something different from Florida State. And like I was saying, Jordan Travis wasn't really that kind of guy either too much, more of an internal vocal guy with the team. But whatever this guy is thinking, he is going to say it. So win or loss, these press conferences should be very interesting, and we'll get that first taste of whenever Florida State faces off against Alabama, who he's already tried to build in this confidence to the team in Tallahassee, and interested to see how Alabama takes that as the Crimson Tide come into Tallahassee to kick off the season. And they sold out Doe Campbell Stadium. It's going to be hot. It's going to be hot.
It's a fresh change, though. I mean, like we said, DJ didn't really say much during his time at Florida State. And, even through the media, this was a guy who was very guided and respectful with what he put out there. Same thing with Jordan Travis. Jordan was always very smart and very careful whenever he spoke to the media, not to put anything out there, not to give anyone any bulletin board material. I like a guy in Tommy Castellanos who comes in, takes a sledgehammer to the board and is like, you know what, I'm just going to say whatever I want and let's let the chips fall where they may.
Well, let's keep on moving on before we go into Florida State landing an offensive lineman now to protect Jaden O'Neal. Make sure you smack that like button down below. We would deeply appreciate it. All of y'all hanging out with us in the offseason. I know it's dry, but shout out Thomas Castellanos giving us some juice here, and also to the Seminoles on the recruiting trail. Got tons of content coming to you on YouTube, also too at NoleGameday.com. So make sure you guys are stay tuned there. But smacking the like button, also too dropping some comments helps us get out to more FSU fans, and we are deeply appreciative of that. Herb Hand grabbed himself an offensive lineman in the 2026 class with a guy from South London, 6'5", 335-pound Luke Francis is a Florida State Seminole and the tribe of 26. Thoughts on this snag here for the Seminoles, Dustin? He's actually been training at the NFL Academy, or was in the UK before moving over to the US, and he is set to play his senior year at Coral Gables Senior High School down here in Florida.
Top of the morning to you.
How long have you been waiting to say that? That's my question of the day. How long?
I've been practicing, but yeah, Florida State able to land an international prospect in Luke Francis, who likely going to play alongside the offensive line when he does arrive at Florida State. And this is a guy who recently emerged on the board. He did take a visit to Florida State back during the 2024 season, but returned last week for one of the summer camps that Florida State is holding. Impressed the coaching staff, picked up an offer, made it back to campus very quickly this weekend for his official visit to Florida State. And, at the conclusion of that trip, went ahead and decided to publicly commit to the Seminoles. I mean, this is an interesting one. Obviously a guy who's pretty new to American football, but, has some athletic potential there, a solid frame at 6'5", 335 pounds, going to have to trim up a little bit once he arrives at Florida State, gets into that college strength and conditioning program back there with Josh Storms. And, it's going to be interesting to see how this one works out with this guy recently arriving in the United States, like you said, going to play a senior season here in the state of Florida. And I'm sure, that's going to be something that Florida State closely monitors as it gets closer and closer to him signing that letter of intent in December. But yeah, really interesting pickup for Florida State to add an international guy. And, obviously you've got another one along the offensive line already in the roster in Lucas Simmons, who originally hails from Sweden. And, we'll see if that's a guy on Florida State's roster who can begin to emerge a little bit after being a blue chip recruit a couple of years ago.
Hey, never a bad idea to get some guys that I feel that at least you can match it over there and hopefully get some development from Coach Storms and work there. And like I said, I'm really intrigued going into this fall camp about Herb Hand and actually seeing development. That's something that was heavily lacked under former Florida State offensive line and co-offensive coordinator Alex Atkins. And so that's something that you just feel a little bit more confident, at least moving forward, in a new guy that has proven that he's been able to do this at a good rate in his career under Herb Hand.
But I will say a little bit of recruiting struggles this month for Florida State. Obviously, you had some offensive tackle prospects go off the board to other programs. They've had some interior options move on as well. And I think that was a big reason Florida State decided to move quickly here after offering Luke Francis. Go ahead and get him in the boat, and then they can focus on some of these other targets that are still out there.
Mm-hmm. Mike's going to have to start getting a stool for some of these photos, man. These are some big boys that are coming. And also, to be honest, Luke Francis does not look like, how old would he be? How old is this kid? He looks like he's 35. All right, maybe not 35, maybe go 32, but he does not look younger than me, man. It's scary. It's very scary what's going on. Let's keep on moving on here, though, to wrap up the show. And Florida State loses out on a offensive lineman, Xavier Payne. And I felt like falling over a few things on the weekend. This was sort of expected here a tiny bit. This is 6'7", 290-pound offensive tackle. This is coming from, what was this, yesterday? A lot of things were going on yesterday. It was crazy. It was busy. But he actually took an official visit to Tallahassee over the weekend before decommitting. He also visited Syracuse and Colorado earlier in June, but I would imagine a conversation was had internally with the coaching staff and Xavier, and this might have led him into maybe finding elsewhere and might have not been the place for him after, them finding some other targets that they feel like they're going to have some success with or finding momentum.
Yeah, and this was a point of excitement for Florida State back in December whenever they landed Xavier Payne. He became, at the time, Herb Hand's first commitment since he had been hired by Florida State. And, obviously the frame coming in and everything, 6'7", he projects to be a pretty solid player at the college level. We'll see how it all works out. But, this offseason, things have changed a little bit for Xavier Payne. I know he switched high schools, moved down there to South Florida from the Orlando area. And then he's also remained relatively open in his recruitment. And, like a lot of recruits do, even though they are committed to other programs, took official visits to Syracuse and Colorado in June. And like you said, returned to Tallahassee this past weekend. It just seemed like with the way that things are trending at this stage, the two parties decided to go ahead and part ways. And, Payne reopens his recruitment. It seems like Deion Sanders or the Orange probably have the best chance to get him into their 2026 class as of now. And then Florida State, going to turn to, like I said a couple minutes ago, what is quickly growing into a thin offensive tackle board. You still got some guys here like Wilson Zier, who is an international recruit. You've got Deron Parks, who officially visited Florida State earlier this month. Also Aaron Thomas, an FSU legacy, who is expected to decide this week, but it seems like right now Texas A&M probably holds the advantage to land his pledge over Florida State. You do have Javion Cooper, a guy who officially visited FSU earlier this month, and he is committed to Syracuse. FSU been trying to do a flip there. And then two other guys, Mitchell Smith out of Mississippi and Ben Mubinga out of Georgia. So, there are a couple guys there in Florida State. They're going to have to move quickly now with the way that these guys are going off the board pretty quick here. But, like we talked about a couple couple minutes ago in the show, with FSU landing Jaden O'Neal, maybe they'll be able to create some more momentum here in Trap 26.
Absolutely. A commitment from a quarterback like that, like I said earlier in the show, could be a ripple effect and trying to maybe do some flipping as well on the recruiting trail. But I think that's going to do it for this week's show. If you're still with us hanging out, got over 75 of you guys. Before you leave, when you mind smacking the like button, it would deeply be appreciated from us as well. If you want to hit the subscribe button too, this notifies you when you go out. We need someone to do something around here. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, help us grow over here on the YouTube side of things, as we've got a lot of content coming throughout this offseason and going into fall camp for you guys. But also too, give your thoughts on what you think about Thomas Castellanos and what he had to say about the Alabama Week 1 matchup and the confidence that it feels like hopefully can trickle over to this rest of the locker room and to a big, new, interesting season ahead for the Florida State Seminoles. That's going to do it for us. We'll see you guys next week on Hear the Spear, and have a great rest of y'all's week. Peace.